Cersei ruthless in these streets, man.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. We're looking at the New Orleans Pelicans team here, their season in review, looking at their upcoming offseason as well and what it might mean for the future. A team obviously with massive question marks heading into this free agency period. We're going to talk about all of that today. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. A Pelicans team that got to the second round of the playoffs last season was an absolutely huge disappointment this year, finishing 33-49. Obviously the Anthony Davis situation where he requested a trade, the fall through in the negotiations with the Lakers. He's still on the team, then was back with the team playing limited minutes and then not playing at the end of the season. Everybody knows the complete screw up that whole situation was, and it feels like that there's almost zero chance that he is back with this team next season. But with a new GM in place, David Griffin's first order of business is to try and convince Davis to stay. With all the bullshit going on with the Lakers, maybe Davis will stay with a high quality, high caliber, high pedigree GM there. Maybe some decisions can be made. Who knows? I'd put it at about 0.05% chance that Davis begins the season in a Pelicans uniform. But David Griffin is definitely going to be doing a good enough job to get him there, or at least get a good package back in return. So much of this team is going to look different, I imagine, at the beginning of next season. But we'll talk about what happened this year. They had the 13th best offense in the NBA, 23rd ranked defense, third in pace. They were a really up-tempo team, obviously under coach Alvin Gentry. We assume Gentry's going to be back next season. We haven't heard any different on that. He is still under contract. In terms of the draft, they have the 7th overall pick coming up in this draft. Actually, before the lottery, they have a 6% chance of getting into the number one spot, a 26% chance of getting into the top 4. In fact, the way that the lottery works now, that all the way down to Dallas, all those teams have a 26% chance of getting into the top 4. So things can mix up pretty quickly in terms of how all these draft choices go. The Pelicans also have pick number 39 and pick number 57. Pick 57 is not doing a huge amount, but 39 could be a decent value selection for this squad as well. Over the course of the season, they did have some pretty high numbers, largely due to their pace. 7th in the NBA in blocks, 3rd in assists, 5th in rebounds overall. 3-pointers, they didn't shoot the ball very well, 34% from 3. That's something that we'll need to improve, obviously. Strong in offensive rebounding. Didn't generate huge amounts of turnovers. Look, and for a team that was 7th in blocks, only 18th in steals, and 22nd in opposing turnover percentage. So, did need to work on that defense. Obviously, that ties into that poor defensive rating that this squad had for the season. In terms of what the offseason looks like, of course, the big questions are going to be surrounding Anthony Davis. He will be in the last year of his contract, so this is the opportunity for them to get something back in return for Davis after he will almost definitely decline that player option at the end of the 2019-20 season. And not including the Davis situation, they can get to $15 million in cap space. They have a few decisions to make. Julius Randle has a decision to make. He has a $9 million player option. I think with the way that he played, he will decline that and look for a larger deal, probably in the $12 to $13 million per year. 3 years, $45 million would make sense to me for Randle. He still got his struggles. He played fairly well, but he still has his issues in terms of defensive stuff where he's quite poor on that end, but I thought it was a really good season from him. Alfred Payton, an unrestricted free agent, probably their number one decision in terms of unrestricted free agents. He was their starting point guard, missed a shit ton of time this season, and when he was out, they struggled at that position. Not that he was excellent when he was playing, but he was a step up from the other guys they had there. There's also Darius Miller and Ian Clark, who are both unrestricted free agents. I don't really view Clark as a must bring back sort of a guy. Miller was okay, but obviously nothing spectacular there. And then for your restricted guys, there's Stan Johnson. He has an $11.8 million cap hold. There is almost no way that they're going to be extending that that qualifying offer to him. I wouldn't think. He showed absolutely nothing after coming across in that trade. And then there's Sheck Diallo, who I do think they'd like to bring back, but Gentry doesn't seem to enjoy him. They've got Christian Wood there who can play that role now, so there's a significant chance that Diallo doesn't get extended that offer as well. You also have a team option and non-guarantee on Jahlil Okafor, who showed some flashes. He is not a starting caliber NBA center, but if Davis goes, there is an opportunity there for him. And at $1.7 million, I do think they will be looking to bring Jahlil back. The other one that they have, or the other non-guarantees, there's Frank Jackson, who started when Jrue Holiday was shut down with that abdominal injury. He was okay. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. Kenrick Williams, they'll definitely guarantee that deal. Christian Wood at $1.6 million, they'll guarantee that deal. And then there's Darius Bertans at $1.4 million. I'm not sure he really showed anything after coming across very, very late in the season. But yeah, Wood, Jackson, and Williams, you'll think that all those deals will be guaranteed without any hesitation. And some other decisions to make. The Julius Randle one, probably the most interesting. And of course, what they end up doing with Anthony Davis is going to be really, really important. What is also important if you are someone who is in charge of hiring at your company is getting the right person to come in for your jobs. Hiring can be challenging, but there is one place where you can go where hiring is simple, it's fast, and it's smart. It's a place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates, and that place is ziprecruiter.com/locked-on. ZipRecruiter will send your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. They use their powerful matching technology to find the candidates that fit with your opening.
Giggity!
ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and then invites them to apply to your job. As those applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one, spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. It is so effective, ZipRecruiter, that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. And right now, all you guys listening can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ziprecruiter.com/locked-on. That's ziprecruiter.com/locked-on. LOCKEDON, ziprecruiter.com/locked-on. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, let's move on to looking at these players now for the Pelicans in more detail. Anthony Davis, obviously a really shit show of a season from him. He was, on a per-game basis, the number 2 ranked fantasy player this year. So there's no denying that the numbers were fantastic, and that's even with the last 2 months of bullshit of low minutes. He still ended up as the number 2 ranked player in 33 minutes a night. He probably wouldn't have caught James Harden, but he would have been closer. 25.9 points, 0.9 threes, 12 boards, 4 assists, 1.6 steals, 2.4 blocks, 52 and 79 from the field and the line. Now, that free throw percentage is a little bit disappointing. 33% from 3, he can get better there. But what is going to happen with Anthony Davis is that people are going to be hesitant to draft him next season. I can guarantee you that, because they're going to be, oh, yeah, you can't rely upon him this bullshit season. If he gets traded, all this discussion goes away. There is no... Now, if he stays with the Pelicans, yeah, I would be pretty concerned about having him in that... number 2 spot in the draft, or number 1 or number 3, depending on what you're doing with Harden and Giannis and all those sort of discussions. That's fine. If he gets dealt, I have no concerns about what he's going to do. Now, going to a high-powered team, does he go to the Lakers with LeBron? That doesn't really worry me. Davis will be the best player on that team. In terms of fantasy especially, and he'll be able to play with LeBron. If he goes to the Celtics, well, that doesn't mean that Kyrie's necessarily going to be there. Who knows what happens with Gordon Hayward. I'm not worried about Davis fitting, and he is the guy, much like Harden when Chris Paul arrived, he is the guy that still gets to do what he gets to do. The other guys are the guys that have to fit in around, and I think that no matter where Davis goes, those numbers will be there. 29% usage, that's fine, but his value doesn't just come from usage. It's rebounding, it's steals, it's blocks. He can get some assists, which is something he really improved upon this season. And I think with a little bit more focus, maybe we can get some of that efficiency up as well. If he's gone, he is going to remain as that top 2, top 3, top 1 sort of a guy, and I don't really have too much to doubt there. For as much as we can be disappointed by the level of advice he received with the way he conducted himself all through the season, and I've loved Davis, all since he's been in the NBA and have defended him at every stop. Some of his stuff this season was absolutely shitful from him, and I've got no problem with players deciding their own agency and where they're going to go, but the way he handled it was really, really poor. And I didn't like the way that he and Clutch Sports went about any of that stuff. I thought it was a really, really bad look on him. And, I lost, not respect, because I don't want to use that in that term, but just the way that it was handled was poor. But still, on court, he was a plus 6.8 on this team. That's a massive number. a plus 5.74 PIPM, one of the best in the entire NBA, despite playing just 56 games. He was really, really good. And the problem we have is just that those games played really dropped at the end of the season. He's adding things to his game. A couple of years ago, he added threes, and he added an ability to get his hands on balls in passing lanes. Now he's added an ability to pass. Like, he's doing all these things, continually adding to his game, continuing to become better. Now I don't know where he goes from here, but being able to maintain this at the age of 26 for 3 more years is absolutely a possibility to stay at this level. And I think that's probably a realistic expectation for Anthony Davis, who was really, really good again this season. And there is marginal room for him to improve. Another guy who was unbelievable this year is Jrue Holiday. Missed the end of the season with that abdominal issue, had to have surgery. Only 67 games, 36 minutes a night, but 21, 5, and 7.5, 1.8 threes, 1.6 steals, and 0.8 blocks, 47 and 77. The free throws are annoying, the fact that they're not at that 80-plus level. But the overall amazing field goal percentage, the high usage, the fact that he was able to maintain that efficiency even when Davis was out, while he was taking on this huge load, playing off ball, playing on ball. The 7.7 assists for a shooting guard is amazing. Yeah, he was doing it because Elfrid Payton was out a lot of that time, but even when Payton was there, he was still able to generate assists. The efficiency was absolutely through the roof for Holiday. Really, really strong stuff. Now, there is a massive chance, I believe, that he could get traded at some point because the Pelicans look to really tear it down. He has 2 more guaranteed years left at $26 million and then a player option for $27 million after that. So a team that trades for him gets him on I think a decent enough contract. He's really, really good. He's going to be in the mix for all defensive team. He should be on one of those teams. Probably not in the mix for all NBA, but really, really strong stuff from Jrue Holiday again, the 17th ranked fantasy guy. He is going to turn 29 soon, so maybe for those 3 years that he could potentially be paid 25 plus million, you might only get that value for 2 of them, but I still think there is value in him. And you might be able to extract some decent assets back in return for Jrue Holiday. But I still obviously really like him. And if Davis goes and he remains, he will still be that top 20 guy. 9.6 wins added this season, plus 3.9 PIPM, a plus 10.5 on-off. He just absolutely carried this team. And I couldn't say enough good things about what Jrue Holiday was able to do for this squad. He hit his 3-pointers at a below average rate, so still got room to improve there, just 33% on his threes overall. He hit 43% of his long twos. He was amazing, 64% at the rim. He was able to distribute the ball. Like, he was just absolutely really impressive right across the board. The defensive stuff, I talked about this in other shows with Victor Oladipo, and there was a guy that I talked about yesterday, and I wish I could remember who it was, Brad Beal, that real spike in steals and blocks. That's not a spike for Holiday. This is just what he does. He is an elite shot blocking, defensive, steal generating guard, and he did it again, and I imagine that he will continue to do it. So I don't have any worry about that sort of dropping off. The next guy we talk about, the 53rd ranked player overall, was Julius Randle. 31 minutes a night, 21 and 9 he averaged. That's obviously really good. The problem with Randle is he just lacks in some of those other areas. Now, one thing we did see is his assist rate jump back up. It really dropped last season playing alongside Lonzo Ball. Back in a different role here in New Orleans, 3.1 assists. His lack of defensive stats keeps him from being an elite prospect. 0.7 steals, 0.6 blocks. 73% from the line's a little bit of an annoying number, but 53 from the field is strong, and 0.9 threes. All good numbers, but he also benefited from a couple of things. Davis being out, and also Nikola Mirotic being out at the start of the season. We saw Randle playing off the bench, playing 24 minutes a night to begin the season, and it was pretty disappointing. I didn't like the fit of him next to Davis. That's not going to be too much of a concern moving forward. And of course, Mirotic isn't even there on this team any longer. I think Randle is a classic example of a guy who can put up good numbers, and we saw really, really good numbers from him this season. But in terms of his on-court production, you've got to have the right fit next to him, and his role probably is better suited to being that best guy, that guy off the bench. And look at the way he started the year: 24, 24, 22, 23, 19, 27, 23, 26, 26, 28, 24 minutes. It took him until the 10th of November to actually exceed 30 minutes, and that's when he moved into the starting lineup when they moved Mirotic to the bench, or Nick might have been injured at that point. But the way that they were planning on using him was in a limited role. And then with all those things happening, with Mirotic being injured, with Davis being in and out, we saw his minutes and his playing time spike up, and that sort of pushed him into that zone. Now, whether he comes back to the Pelicans, with that open front court, whether he goes to another team. I am a little bit concerned about where Randall sits. I just don't think he's necessarily a guy that you want to be playing 33 minutes a night on a really good playoff team. He was a plus 0.07 PIPM. He was a 0.8 on off, so thoroughly average in those metrics. And that's somewhat of a concern with his lack of defense. Really, really strong rebounder, but no defensive numbers that comes from him. He shot the three ball okay. He's okay finishing at the rim. There was just nothing overly that stood out about him, and he benefited from having that large usage role, 27% usage this season, and that's not something that necessarily will be able to stick. And over the last 25 games, he was rocking a 30% usage rate, which would have been by far a career high. So while he was the 53rd ranked player this season, and he played well and put up good numbers, I worry about the translatability of those numbers moving forward. Which team that he goes to. He is still just 24 years of age, so there is room for him to improve. And I've always been historically lower on Randall than most people, and I readily admit that. He has exceeded my expectations significantly. I still have those concerns with him. And it probably won't be a concern next year. He'll probably still be able to put up top 70 numbers next year and maybe the year after. But it's all going to come down to what team he goes to. Unlike Davis, he's not a guy that, and of course he's not like Davis, but he's not a guy that whatever team he goes to, he just does what he does and everyone fits around him. He goes to a good team and he plays 23 minutes, 25 minutes off the bench and does what he does and goes for 16-7 instead of 21-9. And those lack of defensive numbers, I still think he can improve in his passing. He was really good in that this season, a big step up from 2.6 to 3.1 assists per game, but not still approaching the numbers he had in 16-17, where he was putting up really, really strong numbers, 4.5 assists per 36 in that season. So I'm a little bit concerned about what Randall's future does hold. The next guy we look at, Lord Alfred Payton, the 87th ranked player on a per game basis, only 42 games and under 30 minutes, averaging 10.5, 5, and 7.5, a steal, half a block, 0.8 threes, 43, 74, and 31% from three. If you can get Alfred Payton to shoot 74% from the line, you're going pretty well. And normally, he is a high field goal percentage guy. Don't confuse field goal percentage with good shooters, because he's not a good shooter, but he was a guy that was able to put in the numbers when he needed to and hits the shots that he knows he can take. That wasn't the case this season, which dropped his value. We had his standard March run of triple-doubles, where I think he had 4 or 5 consecutive triple-doubles in March, and that always boosts his number. But him as a starting caliber point guard in the NBA is a little bit iffy. I could see him coming back to New Orleans next season and having that role again, but long term, I don't necessarily think that he is a long-term fit as a starting point guard. A negative 0.51 PIPM is not great. Negative 0.2 on off, given the guys coming behind him, Ian Clark, Tim Frazier at times, Frank Jackson. That's not a great number. To only be a negative 0.2 on off is not a good number at all for Payton. And he has obviously some significant concerns with what he does. Now, he does get to the rim quite a lot. He was in the 94th percentile of shooting at the rim. Unfortunately, 52% finishing there is not ideal. Some of his field goal percentage was buoyed by hitting his twos at a decent enough rate, 39%. Still can't hit threes, and there is the concern there. And also some of his defensive stuff dropped off. He had been a better steal merchant in the past and better at getting those numbers. I think there's a legitimate risk, depending on where he fits, that he doesn't fall back into the top 100. And if he does have a season where he's out of the top 100, I think the chances of him getting back into the top 100 moving forward are probably a little bit slim, given what we've seen out of Alfred Payton this season. He had his moments, but there were also some pretty significant struggles for him throughout the season. Etuan Moore, an absolute disaster of a year for him, the 190th ranked player, a guy who played only 28 minutes a night, dealt with his own injuries, missed the end of the season with a quad problem. He is 30 years of age, 12 points, 2.5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 0.8 steals on 48 and 76. An elite shooter, 43% from 3, but it doesn't take enough of them. 3 attempts per game when you're a 43% shooter, and you're a consistent 40% shooter is a little bit of a worry to me. And the fact that he just does nothing else in any other area always renders him as a pretty low value fantasy option. Last season, he was the 124th ranked player in 32 minutes. We saw those minutes drop back down. The shooting sticked. It sticked. That's not the right word. The shooting stuck. It was there, but he just doesn't do anything else. He can't rebound. He doesn't get assists. His steals are okay. The three-point volume isn't there. Now, if he was taking threes in the volume that Wayne Ellington did, then we'd be looking at a guy who had significant value, because he'd be hitting 2.5, 2.7 triples a game. Get me a steal, get me 14 points, and then you're talking about it some value. But as a 30-year-old guy who was moved to the bench, who I don't think really is as capable as what others may make him out to be, apart from the shooting, and he just doesn't take enough from him, that's a bit of a concern. Now, the team was better with him on the court, 0.8 points, marginal, but PIPM, he was really poor. I think he struggled a lot defensively. He was playing out of position a lot at the small forward spot. He is a 2, more than a 3, but he was playing a lot at the 3. He really, really struggled during this season, and at the age of 30, with some nagging injuries, and he did play through injuries a lot of this season, so maybe a lot of his struggles were injury-related, but in saying that, last season he still wasn't an excellent fantasy guy, and he's never going to be a fantasy guy. He's like almost a Tony Snell, a guy that can't do shit despite getting big minutes. He's better than Snell, but he just has, some real struggles. He's a weird free throw shooter. Never had a season where he shot over 80% from the line, despite being a 40% three-point shooter in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So that's a little bit weird in that regard. So there is some concerns with Etuan Moore moving forward. Where he fits on this squad. Of course, him playing the 3 and playing the 2. If Jrue Holiday's gone, maybe that opens up. If Davis goes to the Lakers and Brandon Ingram comes back, then his minutes have disappeared. I wouldn't be putting a huge amount of faith in Etuan Moore jumping back into 14-team league discussion. And I wouldn't really be touching him as a 12-team guy. He's a stream sort of option, and that's really about it. Kenrick Williams is the next guy we need to talk about, an undrafted rookie. Fantastic effort to make the roster, and then played well during the season. Started at small forward for the end of the year, 46 games, 24 minutes, 6-5 with 2 assists and a steal. Didn't shoot well, 38, 68, and 33 for a true shooting of just 49%. But over the last 3 months of the year, cracked into the top 130 in 30 minutes a night. But we saw, and he had that really hot start when he came in. He went, oh shit, look at this. A 21-point game with 8 rebounds, a 12, 8, and 3 in 30 minutes. Yeah, really strong start. And then the minutes started to drop off. The play started to drop off. The shots wouldn't fall. The usage dropped. And one thing that did happen to him at the start of the season, which rectified at the end, he was a really high steals guy in college, and he couldn't get any steals at all. In fact, he had, in his first 10 games, he got steals in just 1 of those games. But after that, they started to come a little bit more thick and fast. And that's part of the value of him, is he can get assists, steals, and blocks. So he's almost like the anti-Etuan Moore, someone who can generate those other numbers, but usage and shooting, he's got to improve those numbers. Now, this is for a guy that's only a 33% three-point shooter, the fact that he took more three-point attempts per game than Etuan minutes is really, it's either a sign against the coaching staff or against Etuan Moore. So that's something that obviously needs to be rectified. Williams is fine. He's got a limited upside, in my opinion. His PIPM was okay as a rookie, negative 1.12. The team was about neutral with him on the court versus off. That's all fine, and it's impressive as a 24-year-old rookie, but where does he get better? It's got to be in the shooting. He's got to turn into a 45% shooter with 36% from 3. He's got to be a little bit higher usage as well. Can he ever be a top 100 guy? I do have some doubts to that, and he did start off well, but then started to drop off as teams adjusted to him being in that starting lineup and figured out what he was able to do. My man, Cheick Diallo, despite playing only 14 minutes a night, was the 240th ranked player on a per-minute basis. That's pretty good. 6-5 with half a steal and half a block on 62 and 75, which is a true shooting of 64%. For reference, in per 36 numbers, 15.5, 13.5, 1.2 steals and 1.3 blocks, which is really strong numbers. The fact, though, is that Alvin Gentry doesn't like him as a player, has zero trust in him, and is not ever going to play him 30-plus minutes, even with the Davis situation and Okafor injuries and Randall struggling at times. We just rarely saw those opportunities for Diallo, and him as a restricted guy, I'm not sure what they're going to do. And my faith in him, it's been high for a long time. It's waning now. He just hasn't had that opportunity. And maybe that's coaching. Maybe that's just Gentry not recognizing, and he goes somewhere else and finds himself in a Richaun Holmes role and plays 22 minutes a night and can be a top 150 guy. There is a potential there for that. PIPM was just a marginal negative. On-off stuff wasn't horrible, but it wasn't good. Negative 2.6, it's not a great number there. I still think there is something there with Diallo, but the opportunities have been there for him to grasp, and he's never been able to do it. How much of that do you put on him? How much of that do you put on the coach remains to be seen. His efficiency is really, really strong. He's hitting his twos at a good rate. He's hitting his mid-ranges at a pretty good rate, but I still have some concerns about how that all plays out. Darius Miller, 29 years of age, 26 minutes a game, 8 points with 2 threes and 2 assists, which is a little bit of a surprise.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Only shot 39% from the field and 37% from three. He really is just a one-dimensional guy, a guy who goes out there and bombs in threes. I worry about what his future holds. He was a little bit, he was a positive on-off guy, but negative PIPM as well. But played the fourth most amount of minutes on this team overall. A little bit of a surprise there, but not someone that we should be looking at moving forward as this excellent type of option. The guy you're going to be more interested in hearing about is Jahlil Okafor, the 245th ranked player this season. Only 16 minutes overall, 8 and 5 with 0.7 blocks on 59 and 66 for a true shooting of 60%. Of course, when Davis was out, he started to look a little bit better. But we still had situations where even when Davis was gone, that he would start and play limited minutes. Randall would come in, Diallo would come in, Christian Wood would come in. He had that really hot stretch in the middle of January where he hit 20 and 10, 17 and 10, 18 and 8, 24, 15, 27, 12, 14 and 8, 25 and 13 over that stretch. And then never was the same after that. End of the season with 2 really big games. It's hard to get a full judgment on what Okafor is like, but still, overall, I think that the defensive stuff is still a problem for him. He was a negative 4.1 on-off with this squad. It is a real issue, and he did put up some nice garbagey type numbers towards the end of the season. But if you're banking on Jahlil coming in and finding a starting role because he's a vegan now and he's showed these things and he can be a 20 and 10 guy, that's fine. But if he is a 20 and 10 guy, that means your team is going to be one of the worst 4 teams in the NBA, because while he's out there and getting those minutes, he will put up those numbers. I've got no doubt about that. The numbers will get put up, but the team will be bad. And that's where I have my concerns with Jahlil. But it was good to see him go out there and at least show the best basketball he's shown in many, many seasons. He hit his twos at a decent enough rate. Defensively, he was a little bit better, but still, he is a concern on that end, no doubt about that. Passing-wise, he still really, really struggles. Can't hit his free throws. I don't have as much hope in Jahlil Okafor as many others would. Stan Johnson, another disappointing year. He had an opportunity to grasp a starting small forward job in Detroit and just let us down again. 18 minutes, 7 points, 0.9 threes, 0.9 steals, 39%. Just cannot shoot at all. Offered nothing coming across to the Pelicans, negative 3.09 PIPM. That's really, really poor. Negative 14.7 on-off is disgustingly bad. I think he's likely to find himself on another team at a minimum contract as the 14th man on the roster. And my hopes for him moving forward are absolutely non-existent. I just don't see him being able to do anything. We've had 4 years of it. He's been on 2 teams. He had a huge opportunity here with the Pelicans with that open small forward spot. Couldn't grasp it. Now he has these games where he comes out and has 18 points and shoots 4 of 6 from 3 and has 4 steals and 6 assists. And you go, shit, is this what Stanley Johnson can be? And then the next game he has 4 points and 1 rebound and shoots 2 of 11. And you go, well, maybe is this what Stanley Johnson can be? He is a little bit tough to get your head around, but those flashes are really nice. A game against the Magic on the 20th of March. 18, 4 and 3, 2 threes and 2 steals. And you go, here we go. That's something. A game against the Nuggets when he was a member of the Pistons. 21 and 7 with 4 threes, 2 steals and a block. Okay, that's nice. And then you see the absolute nonsense of some of his other performances. But he showed a few flashes at the end of the season that makes me think some team will take a flyer on him as a minimum guy. But, will he ever be a fantasy factor as a top 150 guy? I really think that's not going to be on the cards for Stan Johnson. And I reckon he's maybe got 2-3 years left in the NBA with his current level of play. Let's talk about someone who lots of people are interested in. That's Christian Wood. He played 21 games this season, 12 minutes a game, 8 and 4 with 0.3 steals and 0.5 blocks on 52 and 73 for a true shooting of 61%. He was obviously massive once he arrived in New Orleans. The last 8 games of the season, 24 minutes, 17 and 8 with 0.9 steals and 1.3 blocks. Now, he did tend to drop off after that, but really put up some strong numbers. That end of the season run from him, 23 and 9 with 3 steals and 6 blocks, 25 and 9 with 3 steals and a block, 15 and 11 with 1 and 1, 8-9, 17-5, 14-7, and 26-12. With Diallo probably gone, with Davis likely out of there, who knows what's happening with Julius Randle? I think that Christian Wood is going, and Jolly Okafor as well. I think Christian Wood will be a rotation piece for this team next season. If he is a 22-minute-a-night guy, he's going to push the top 150 in that area. I thought he was really impressive. He puts up massive numbers in the G League, but of course, it is really limited minutes here for New Orleans on a team that wasn't trying. He still was a negative 4.4 on off, a neutral PIPM, but the upside on him is huge. He hopefully has put it all together off court, which was really the thing that was holding him back throughout most of his career. Now, he's never going to be a good guy that gets the passes, but he can hit threes, he can score, he can rebound, he can get steals, he can get blocks, and he can be efficient from the field and from the line. You put all of that stuff together, and you're talking about literally a top 40 upside guy, maybe higher, but getting that opportunity to get those minutes, it feels like it's a stretch away, but he is absolutely someone. If he's sitting on a waiver wire in a dynasty format, you're grabbing him, because with Davis, Okafor, Randle, or potentially Diallo, all potentially gone from this team next season. Hey, Wood could be gone as well, but there is a potential huge opening there for him to at least find an 18-minute-a-night role. Shit, maybe he gets to a 26-minute-a-night role. And if it gets to 26-minute-a-night, we're all going to be pretty excited. But he also has a little bit of the, when you're playing more minutes in a competitive portion of the season, maybe some of this production gets drilled down a little bit. But obviously, huge upside for Christian Wood. Solly Hill, out of the rotation this season, 20 minutes a game, 44 games, just one of the worst fantasy producers you can find. He is still under contract. I'm sure Pelicans fans are absolutely loving that fact. For one more year at $13 million, and then he'll be gone. He's not going to be a likely big piece in any sort of fantasy league, and I think his future as being a contributor is pretty limited. The last two guys I want to talk about, Ian Clark, 28 years of age, 16 minutes a night. He is just not a rotation or starting caliber guy, I don't believe. Whether he returns to this team remains to be seen. He can have those flashes, he can have those moments, but nothing overly exciting about Ian Clark. And lastly, Frank Jackson, who started the end of the season for Jrue Holiday, but he's really such an incomplete fantasy player that he gets a little bit overrated, because he can go out there and he can score in big bunches. Averaged 8 points with 1 3, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, and half a steal, and that meant that he was the 365th ranked player. Over the end of the season, the last 8 games where he started, 34 minutes a game, and 193rd. That's Colin Sexton level. 17.5 points, but he just doesn't do anything else. Steals and blocks are limited. Field goals and free throws are poor. Assists and rebounds are low. The 1.9 threes is nice. That's what he is. He's a scorer, and he's a guy that puts up threes. And then Jrue Holiday comes back next season, and Jackson goes back to a quite a limited role. His advanced numbers were really bad. Negative 3.59 PIPM is not good. 4.6 negative on the on-off stuff. He doesn't project as a great fantasy player moving forward. If people are enamored by the 17 points he put up over those last month or so of the season with Holiday out, then you should be looking to trade him away, because it didn't even make him a top 150 player, because all he does is score with nothing else at all. In points leagues, that's a little bit more helpful, but in category leagues, he does really struggle in that area, and my hope for Frank Jackson moving forward and being able to do any of those other things is relatively limited. That'll do it for the season review for the New Orleans Pelicans. Don't forget to check out our sponsor today, ZipRecruiter.com/lockedon, and subscribe to this podcast, Locked On Fantasy Basketball, on the Himalaya podcast app. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. Leave me a review, that would be excellent. And on YouTube, subscribe, give a thumbs up, leave a comment, all that great stuff. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Frank Jackson.